Everyone's favorite boondoggle out in the Central Valley. Let's talk about it. The high-speed rail. We know the high-speed rail has been under construction for over a decade, if not way more than a decade. It's always a couple years away from being done. And remember, the original plan was to go from LA to San Francisco and get there in like 2 or 3 hours. That plan's changed because I think they figured out it was a little too hard. And now it's going from Modesto or Fresno up to Modesto. So Central Valley. They're now trying to spin it as if like, no, this is what we planned this is great for California. Forget the LA to San Francisco. We're not doing that anymore. However, we're going to spin it that now if you take it, it's going to help the whole Central Valley. We planned this to do with the Central Valley. Lots of people know how much money we've spent on it. Tens of billions of dollars. I think we've dropped already like $30 billion on it. And well, they asked President Trump this week his thoughts on the high-speed rail, and we're going to watch this clip about what he thought about the high-speed rail.
A railroad going from San Francisco to LA, I think it's 100 times overbudget. It's incredible. One of the most incompetent things, that's new scum.
And why do they keep funding that?
I think we're not going to. In fact, a little bit of a story, we're not going to fund that anymore. It's out of control. First of all, it doesn't go where it's supposed to. We're supposed to go from LA to San Francisco. Now, because they don't have any money, they've spent, 30, 40 times more than it was supposed to spend. And they made it much shorter because it no longer goes into the cities. It stops miles outside of the cities.
Because if you were...
He's not wrong. He's not wrong that it's cost way more than they expected it was going to. They've laid just a mile or two of track. They keep going back on what the promise of this is going to be. Like President Trump just said, it's not even close to the cities that they originally said. It's not even close to LA or San Francisco anymore. Modesto is over 2 hours, if not more, from San Francisco. I used to go to school in Stockton. I know Stockton and Modesto are close, but I remember Stockton was like 2.5 hours away from San Francisco. So it's not close. Now they're trying to play it off as, no, we need the money. We need the money because it's going to be such a great boon to the Central Valley of California. That was the plan all along. If we can just do this, so many people will take this high-speed rail directly from Fresno to Modesto. It'll create jobs and housing and all of that stuff. That's why we need the federal money. And they're all freaking out now because, well, there was an audit. Let's look at that. So there was an audit that the feds had completed, and basically let's just say they weren't happy with what happened. It said the Federal Railroad Administration's 310-page report released last week laid the groundwork for the Trump administration to pull $4 billion from the state's bullet train project in the coming weeks. Officials at the California High-Speed Rail Authority defended the project from a scathing federal audit they say is inaccurate, often outright misleading presentation of the evidence. The Federal Railroad Administration's 310-page report released last week laid the groundwork for the Trump administration to pull $4 billion from the state's bullet train project in the coming weeks. They're going to say California's high-speed rail project was initially envisioned as a Los Angeles to San Francisco line that would cost up to $33 billion and operational by 2020. We've blown past that. 2020 is 5 years ago, blown past that, but the project has been plagued by delays and cost increases in the 17 years since California voters first approved a bond for its construction. The latest estimates indicate completing the project as originally envisioned could top $100 billion. Of course, the High-Speed Rail Authority disputes the federal audit's findings, basically saying that the federal government's report includes 9 key findings. The report says California has no viable path to completing the Bakersfield to Merced high-speed rail segment by 2033. So it's 2033 now. It was supposed to be done by 2020. Now it's 13 years later. It's not even the proposed high-speed rail that we were going to get, which was from LA to San Francisco. They go on to say the project is expected to lift the Central Valley's economy, which has long lacked the government investment other parts of California have benefited from. Quote, high-speed rail isn't just about transportation. It's about connecting Fresno's people and the economy to the rest of California. So that is that story. Well, it's that right there. It's amazing that they continue to do this and keep funding this or keep asking for funding. I remember when Gavin Newsom, when Joe Biden was first elected, he had made a statement about, well, now we have a partner in the White House who's going to help us complete the high-speed rail, which meant that they were just going to be flooding this project with billions of dollars. And now President Trump has come in and been like, wait a second. Sean Duffy is the transportation secretary. So wait a second, what are we spending all this money on? You're missing deadlines. You're asking for changes. Money just keeps flowing into this and there's no progress. And even with your report, there's no viable path for you to get it done by 2033. Like, we're talking 2033, not 2020 or a couple of years from now. It is 2033 is when they're expecting to get this done. And this has continued to be pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. There is a executive director of the high-speed rail, and I believe he makes about $500,000 as the executive director. I tried to look up what the CEO of high-speed rail makes. It hasn't been published yet. I think he's brand new. But a lot of people are making a ton of money off of the high-speed rail. That's all. I mean, that's the only thing I can imagine is that people keep making money off this. Now, there was an article that came out from the LA Times. I'll pull that up real quick. Okay. Where basically it says why California won't give up on the dream of the high-speed rail. Right. I don't know. I think I'm giving up on the idea of the high-speed rail. This is from the LA Times. They go on to say, we heard the stories and seen the headlines over and over. Trump administration to pull $4 billion in funding from the California high-speed rail, which it looks like he's going to do. In the face of constant negative prognostications and outright attacks by pundits and politicos of all stripes, how is it that California, like Sisyphus, keeps pushing such a giant boulder up an ever-growing mountain? We have to admit that the history of our state's high-speed rail has been disappointing, to say the least. The route has been planned, changed, argued over, compromised, and hammered out over many years. Too many consultants were hired, too many lawsuits filed, too many hands have dipped into governmental pot that looks like a get-rich scheme. The money starts and stops, which causes efficiency losses of all kinds. The ultimate political football, easy to kick by anyone with hatred of the other side, which seems to be all of us now. The final environmental impact report has been approved after a Herculean effort. A lot of Greek imagery going on here. Construction is well underway, and yet many hurdles remain. Then they go on to say, if you're ready for this, they give you the reasons why we shouldn't give up, right? They say, why give up? Why won't California give up on the dream of high-speed rail? Even though most of the people watching this right now would absolutely give up on the idea of the high-speed rail immediately. They go on to say, despite the larger-than-life challenges, there are a few social issues that keep our state pounding away at this dream. Traffic is one of them. Californians clog their freeways up and down the state nearly all hours. We subsidize highways to the tune of $32 billion a year, only to sit on them stewing. But we still love our cars, so would travelers give them up going up and down the state? Apparently, yes. In a recent survey, 54% of Californians still believe high-speed rail is worthwhile, which also means that 46% also don't think. It's a lot closer than they're making it sound. Remember, this is fun. This is how a lot of media does this. This is fun with percentages where they'll say 54% are in favor of it. So clearly it's overwhelming majority. 46% is almost half are also not in favor of it. So it's pretty close. You're eking out by 4%, suggesting they would rather take a 3-hour train trip than spend 6 to 8 hours driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles. All right. First off, how many people are driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles on a daily commute? Like, that's not a daily commute. So their argument is that traffic, which people have to deal with every day. It's true. People deal with it. Every big city in the United States, there is traffic. I'm sorry. New York, Chicago. I mean, anywhere you go, DC, Boston, everywhere, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, they all have traffic. And then your way to counter and prove that people don't want to sit in traffic is that people would rather take a 3-hour train trip than spend 6 to 8 hours driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles. That's not the same thing. If you're driving from LA to San Francisco or vice versa, wouldn't you just plan that like as a weekend trip or something like that? You're not doing that every day. So already right off the bat, traffic. That's their big excuse. Well, traffic, obviously. Isn't that what public transportation's for? The high-speed rail isn't going to address the fact if you're driving from Riverside to LA or somewhere within LA County into LA. It's not going to address that. But they want you to think that these are the same thing, that it's addressing the same sort of thing. Also, we do spend a lot of money on roads here in California. In fact, that's part of why our gas is so darn expensive is, well, we need to do it for the roads. Same reason why people have to pay hundreds of dollars for car registrations is because it's for the roads, right? We're going to fix the roads. We're going to build better roads. We're going to have great roads. Well, they instituted the gas tax, I don't know, about 10 years ago at this point, and the roads are not any better than they ever were. They continue to get worse. All right, so the next thing, but aren't there more pressing problems for California to worry about, like housing, for instance? Like most states, California faces an affordable housing crisis. Perhaps unintuitively, trains can help here as well. The decision to run the rail line through the Central Valley was deliberate. Oh, now it's deliberate, right? It was LA to San Francisco. Now it's deliberate. We meant to send it through Central Valley. That was always our purpose. This is the area of the state with the least expensive land to develop for housing and commerce. Just as the East Coast developed into a string of megacities linked by Amtrak, California is evolving into its own megalopolis. Again, a false comparison because New York, Boston, and DC are still closer in proximity than San Francisco and LA by a good margin, right? You can get on a train in New York and get to Boston pretty quickly. You don't need a high-speed rail. Same thing with New York to Washington, D.C. You can get there pretty quickly. Don't need a high-speed rail. Much smaller area to keep in mind, right? This is a much smaller distance on the East Coast. And this goes to the same for the argument, well, they do it in Japan, they do it in Europe. Look at all these great places. Smaller distance, less track, less to deal with, as opposed to almost 1,000 miles. Just as it goes on to say, California is evolving into its own megalopolis. High-speed rail will not only connect these areas of housing and commerce, but also will help produce them by reducing transportation issues. People will be able to commute by rail from affordable areas or live farther from urban centers without sacrificing access to urban amenities. Another huge factor, and you knew this was coming, you knew this was going to be something they brought up. This is, why do you think we need a high-speed rail? It's climate change. So go on to say another huge factor in the high-speed rail discussion is climate. Extreme weather events are growing worse, more frequent, and more costly. More than 16,000 structures were destroyed in LA's January wildfires, an astounding loss. The science of climate change is undeniably clear, and California is ground zero for those effects. So that's where we're at. It's traffic. If you're commuting, high-speed rail somehow helps with that. If you're somehow commuting you have the unenviable commute from San Francisco to LA every day, the high-speed rail will help you with that. Still 3 hours. It's quite a long trip. Quite the commute back and forth. The second is because it was deliberate. They wanted to go through the Central Valley. The whole plan was always Central Valley, even though I remember the whole plan used to be up the coast from LA to San Francisco. That was sort of the point of it, was you can get from LA to San Francisco really quickly. But all in all, that was the LA Times. That was the best they could do for why we need a high-speed rail. Forget the fact that they admitted that billions have been wasted on it, that is way behind schedule, that people have been looting the high-speed rail project for years. They've been using this as a get-rich-quick scheme. Forget that they've admitted all of that. There's these three things. Well, if you don't like sitting in traffic in your daily commute, use the high-speed rail if you go from San Francisco to LA. Okay? Already, right off the bat, not a great start. Second reason is because it was deliberate. We wanted to help the Central Valley. We've always cared about the Central Valley. Forget that we don't pay attention to it at all when any of our state candidates are running. Democratic gubernatorial candidates never go to the Central Valley. They don't care. They just go to the three big cities. So now all of a sudden, I guess they care about the Central Valley and housing and all stuff like that. And then obviously they got to throw in climate change. I'm surprised they didn't throw in something like social justice or equity or something like that. That was the other reason that we need a high-speed rail. All of those are really bogus kind of excuses of why we need to continue to spend billions and billions of dollars on this high-speed rail and this high-speed boondoggle. bottom line, the high-speed rail is an absolute money pit, and they're never going to stop. And if you've heard me say it before on this show, I'll say it again because it's worth repeating. There's one thing you can be absolutely sure politicians will never, ever do. They will never, ever, ever admit that they were wrong. They'll never do it. They will never do it. Even when they are dead wrong and facts are right in their face, they will never, ever, ever do it. And the high-speed rail is part of that mentality of, I'm never going to admit that the high-speed rail was a bad idea. Newsom will never admit that it was a bad idea. So let's just keep pouring money in it. It's funny they used mythical figures in the LA Times opinion piece as an argument because at this point, the high-speed rail really is a mythical figure in California. I've never seen it. I don't know if it exists. I don't know if it will ever exist. So just like those Greek mythical figures, the high-speed rail is also a mythical figure here in California.